convictions of David Norris and Gary Dobson
in January
2012, because that was the culmination of years and years of struggle.
I am interviewing today is one of Britain's best known lawyers and has been in the limelight since 1993 following the racist murder of 18-year-old Stephen Lawrence. Two of Stephen's killers, David Norris and Gary Dobson, were convicted in January 2012, nearly 19 years after Stephen's murder. Whilst his name is very much linked to Stephen Lawrence, he has also represented many clients in other high-profile cases, including representing the family of 19-year-old Asian youth Zahid Mubarak, who was beaten to death in March 1999 by a fellow prisoner, a non-violent racist. He also represented Mr. and Mrs. Climbié, the parents of Victoria Climbié, the 9-year-old child who died in February 2000 following the systemic and horrendous abuse by her aunt and her aunt's lover. He is a senior partner in the Central London human rights law firm, Imran Khan Partners. Imran, what was your first job?
I'm too old to remember my first job, but I've done lots of summer jobs between in summer holidays. So I've worked in a bakery, I've worked in a major supermarket, I've worked in a burger franchise. I've worked...
Not mentioning any names.
Not mentioning any names, one of the big ones. And I've worked in local authority with adults who were physically and mentally disabled. So I've done lots of jobs in the summer, and my family had this sort of what I would call the Protestant work ethic, that work was the key thing. You just couldn't lay around, and within the Asian community it wasn't like the English community, if I can call it that, the indigenous community, which went off to Spain and holidays. All the students would come back and say, I went to Lanzarote or Tenerife. I never went ever anywhere. I was working in the summer, because we didn't. That's not what Asian families did, and it's changed a lot since then. But my first job as a lawyer, when I did a training contract with Burnberg Pierce Partners, now Burnberg Pierce, Gareth Pierce, when Guildford 4 and Birmingham 6 was happening. So a really exciting time for me as a trainee solicitor, article clerk back then. And then after that, I then started up a criminal department in Ealing with J.R. Jones solicitors, and I was working there for about 10 years before we set up the same practice in Imran Khan Partners. So, in a nutshell, that's my CV for me.
I do hope you've had a holiday ever since.
I have had a holiday since. I must confess, I'm one of the worst holiday takers, because I get bored after 2 or 3 days, and I love the advent of email and mobile phones, because you can be
anywhere.
In constant contact on a beach. I've been known to be at the top of a mountain and taking a call from the office, and on the beach emailing the office. So I'm afraid I'm one of those individuals that can't seem to get away from the office.
So it's now documented. Imran Khan is a workaholic, basically.
Well, I don't see it that way. My family may.
Why did you choose a career in law?
I was destined to be a doctor, since I was, what's the phrase, knee-high to a grasshopper. I was cutting up earthworms, which I would get out from the garden, and my dad bought me a scalpel and a little kit used for dissection. So I was dissecting earthworms and any other living creature, dead creature, sorry, I could find.
Living and dead.
But it changed when I started getting involved in community politics in the East End of London. And one of the big campaigns at the time was the Newham 7 campaign, which is about 7 young men who had been arrested and charged, and were appearing at the Old Bailey for serious offences, when what they actually did was defend themselves from racists. And I happened to go along and was sitting in the public gallery watching the barristers who were defending these men. These were people like Helena Kennedy, Mike Mansfield, Rudy Narayan, Ian MacDonald. And it was fascinating. It was theatre, but more importantly, it was bringing into the courtroom things that were from the community. Before that, courtroom was this ancient place where you didn't see black faces. Now this was all about racism in the East End of London. It was very close to what I knew, what I'd been brought up with. So that changed me, and my parents were none too happy at the time. And so that started the process of getting me into the legal profession.
Okay. So if you were to choose a profession other than law, what would it be and why?
Oh, it'd be a doctor. I mean, I
back to medicine.
Back to medicine. I loved it. I mean, it sounds probably a bit ghoulish, but I love the idea of the human body and seeing inside it. And yes, it sounds silly, but I was destined to be a brain surgeon. I've met neurosurgeons since, and I devour everything they say, and I've used neurosurgeons in court cases, and it's like me being a doctor all over again.
Okay.
So yeah, I'd love to, and I don't know if the legal profession ever goes, I might start doing retrain as a doctor. But the other thing is, I just love the idea of a bit like a lawyer being able to help those in countries where you don't have a good health regime, and I'd love to do that. It would be a second calling for me.
Great. So what was the best career advice you were given?
Best career advice I was given?
Advice you were given, yes.
None. I was never given any career advice, and I went to a comprehensive school where our aspirations were low beyond belief, and what I found at school was very different to what I found at home. Home was all about achievement to get the best, whereas school was about you're simply getting through. And I found that slightly odd, whereas it should be at school that you're trying to achieve the best. So I didn't like school particularly. I didn't like the education system. It was of its time. It wasn't particularly good, particularly for young black students in the East End of London. But yeah, I think in the end, if I were to point to anything which helped me in terms of being a better lawyer, and I repeat this now to young people who are lawyers, and this comes from a High Court judge who was the barrister that I used regularly, he said there were 3 words that he would give, and that's preparation, preparation, preparation. and I believe that to this day. If you are well prepared, you can deal with anything, and particularly those from black communities who are in this profession or any profession, if you do something wrong, it doesn't just reflect on you, it reflects on the whole community. And if you do something wrong, it is magnified tenfold or 100-fold. Your white counterpart would be able to do it, and it's just a mistake, or nothing much would be taken of it. But you find yourself that when you go into a courtroom, when you go into a scenario, that people are looking at you because of your ethnicity, and that plays a big part in whether you're seen to be successful or not.
Yes. What was the worst career advice you were given?
Yes. So I've never been given career advice. I mean, I have, many years ago, I was asked who I would say was my inspirational teacher. You pick your best teacher for one of these newspapers, and you know what, I couldn't think of any, and in the end I plumped for my dad. My dad was my best teacher in some ways. He was the person who pushed to achieve, and so I suppose the best advice that he ever gave me was, you've got to be the best at what you do, and you can succeed. And I think it's a bit of a cliche, and it doesn't take into account the discrimination that occurs in our society, which the best don't necessarily get where they want to go. But it's still, I think, a mantra that I subscribe to, that you can achieve, but you've got to work hard at it.
So in a way, you're really lucky you didn't have horrible career advice. Simply didn't have any.
Yes, I'm lucky I didn't have somebody sit down and say to me, you will not succeed at what you want to do. If nobody stopped me from having that aspiration of being a doctor, that's the one thing I can say, but nobody said to me, look, this is sort of occupation, professions that people from this school go to. No. They were ending up being milk people, milk delivery people, and factory workers, and and others. So there were very few who I think I never made a success of myself in the school that I went to.
What is the best career advice you would give others?
I think it is that. It is, you can achieve if you work hard. I think there is a tendency for people to make assumptions that if they simply do enough, that gives them the right to things, whether it's a job, etc. You've got to recognise that there's discrimination. You've got to recognise that there isn't a level playing field, and you've got to work hard at it. I'm afraid it is such a simple bit of cliched advice. You work hard, you will succeed. You will. It may take longer, but success will come to it. And I'm afraid that whatever you do, whether it's the case that you're doing the next day, whether it's you want to be passing exams, whether you want to be X, Y, or Z, it's working hard. And I don't think anybody's, well, there will be some people who've got something for nothing, but most people don't.
No shortcuts.
Yes. There's no shortcuts, I'm afraid. No, none whatsoever.
What are you most passionate, happiest about?
Oh, what am I happiest and passionate about? My work. I love what I do. I often say this in lectures I give, as I quote, and I think I misquote Confucius, which is that if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a single day in your life. And I haven't. For 20 years now, for however many years I've been doing this, I've enjoyed every single minute of it. So it's the clients, it's the, well, I suppose part of it is taking on difficult cases and challenging cases and being able to try and make them into something. If I wake up in the morning and I get an easy case, that's not a challenge. If I wake up in the morning and a challenging case arrives at my desk, that's what gets me going. That's what gets the juices flowing.
What are your dislikes?
Oh, the list is endless.
Go on, let's hear it.
No, we're being here too long. There's huge amounts of dislikes. For me, equality and inequality has been a feature of both my life and the work that I've done. And I find it difficult to comprehend that there remain in society people who make judgments and treat people according to their ethnicity, their background, etc. I find that hard to accept. It remains a huge problem in society. And I just don't understand why people take that view. Inequality, whether it's within treatment, whether it's relating to wealth, in terms of poverty. Inequality is now such a big issue, both in terms of wealth and in terms of ethnicity. But I think that's the one big issue across the board. And inequality is tied into injustice and all the other things. It's the fundamental.
Do you think that's more so now? Or is it better?
I think it's...
Than say 20 years ago?
No, I think it's different. I think it remains, and because the thing is that the figures don't lie. And if you look at figures 20 years ago, you look at figures now, it's still there in terms of stock. If you look at the factors or the indicators in terms of stock and search, etc., they're still the same or similar, and in some cases worse. So if you look at those factors, it's still happening. What you don't have now is the overt racism that we had. I mean, I grew up with programs like Mind Your Language and the NF and the intercity firm at West Ham. So those things which are obviously racist were in your face. You don't have that, but it does. What you have now is something different. It's changed in its format, but it's still there.
So tell me, who is the person you most admire, dead or alive?
That's the difficult, because there's a lot of people that I admire, dead and living.
Most admire.
It's very difficult to put somebody at the top of that list, but in terms of the people that that I've been able to see over a long period of time, rather than read about, it's got to be Dorian Lawrence, who has been an inspiration to me and has been inextricably linked to my life. And the admiration that I have for her is unparalleled. She has lost a teenage son who was, by all accounts, going to be a very successful adult, and despite that she was able to do what she did, and that's what kept me going. It's not me, I was just the lawyer. She could have disappeared off the radar any time in that period. And as a parent, I don't think I would have been able to do what she did. So from that point of view, I think simply because I know her. I mean, I could mention, people from the past, Gandhi, Mandela, all these other people that, and all the other people. But I think in terms of knowing somebody, knowing what they've gone through and seeing their journey, I think she would be the person that I would prefer. Definitely.
Clearly, it's a silly question I'd ask, but could you just tell me your professional high?
Oh, the convictions of David Norris and Gary Dobson
in January
2012, because that was the culmination of years and years of struggle for Dorian, and not for me personally. I mean, part of it for me was redemption because I had failed in the private prosecution. This was part of that redemption for me, that we had given, or justice, some sort of justice had been given to Dorian when we had failed in the private prosecution. And for her, it was a huge relief. It was a huge success. Yes, that was. I mean, there have been others in my time, but if you had to pick out one particular point in time, that would have to be it.
It was only some months ago, really.
That was only some months. It feels like an eternity, and so much has been said and talked about since then. But yes, it's phenomenal, and even today, the number of people who come up to me and shake my hand because of that, I find remarkable. It's touched so many people in so many different ways, everywhere, across the spectrum. People have come up to me, not just from the black communities, but from every walk of life, from wealthy to poor, from black and white, every spectrum.
And because it's changed so much as well.
It's affected
the law, the police, the way they operate, and everything else.
The tentacles of that case. That's probably the worst way of putting it. But its reach has gone to places that we would never have imagined, and it's changed the psyche of this country to such an extent. And I'm just so proud to be associated with that case, and overwhelmed when people stop me in the street and thank me for it. I find it highly embarrassing. I'm just a lawyer. That's it.
Just think about it. It's been 20 years in April when you took on this case. So, how has this affected your life?
My life? Hugely, dramatically. I mean, what other superlative can I use? What other adjective I can use? It's completely changed my life. I've been able to do things that I don't think I would have ever done. When I started off the law, it was simply about representing my community. By that I mean the community in the East End, or those that came from impoverished backgrounds of particular type, trying to fight the establishment, if I can put it in very crude terms. That's what I would have been doing, and I would have had no qualms if we were talking about that now, and that's all I've been doing. But I've been able to do phenomenal cases and got involved in phenomenal cases. I've been able to do things, gone to places where I never would have dreamt of. So yes, completely changed my life. In a sense, people identify me with that most closely, and although that's not the only thing I've ever done, yes, I'm not like one of those actors or singers who says, that one song, that one film should not define me. I'm happy to be defined by that. But on the other hand, that case has allowed me to do and take on cases that would never have come to my desk, I think. But call it fate, destiny.
So you're very happy.
I'm very happy. I'm
forever linked to this
case. Absolutely.
How have you coped with the media attention ever since?
I dislike it immensely. I must confess that when I was growing up, my father said I was an incredibly shy child. I was known to be an incredibly shy child. So the idea that I can go in front of a camera and speak was a complete surprise to me, I must confess. And I don't like it. But what we found out early on in the Lawrence case is that the mainstream media did not look into the lives of black families. It was always in the context of negative stereotypes. And therefore you had to use the media. And it came to me very quickly that I had to do it, particularly when Doreen herself disliked it even more than I did.
Absolutely, yes.
But I had no option, and quickly got into a position where I did interviews, and the media have been, by and large, incredibly sympathetic, supportive, and we, the family and I, owe them a great deal in the support that they've shown from quarters that we would never have imagined. The Daily Mail.
I'm just about to say that.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've got used to it. I know its role in society, but if I had a choice, I would never do a single interview if I could avoid it.
That's the pipe dream, though. Do you know that?
I know, and
hence why we're sitting here today.
And people say to me, "Look, it helps others and all the rest of it," and I understand that. But yeah, we have to do things that we don't like sometimes, and I'm doing something that I don't like.
Do you have any professional regrets?
Many. I mean, I have made lots of mistakes in my career, and when people join me in my firm, I say to them, when they're starting off, I say, "Look, you will make mistakes. Nobody is infallible. Nobody doesn't make mistakes. I've made many, too many to list. And what I say is that you'll make those mistakes, but you need to learn from them. And I think you become a better lawyer for having made those mistakes.
Does that mean, although you've made the mistakes, you have no regrets?
No, yes, you're right. I think that's the right way. I don't have any regrets. I think everything that I did, I would not change. And the big issue for me was always the private prosecution. And whether would I have done that now, if I were in the same position.
Just to clarify, the Stephen Lawrence.
The Stephen Lawrence private prosecution, yes. I mean, it failed. And there were lots of fingers pointed my way as to, because being the lawyer and advising the family.
Because of the double jeopardy rule at the time.
Because at the time, the trial would have taken place, and if they had been acquitted as they were, we couldn't try them again. So, yeah, I don't know whether I'd made the right decision. I think age makes you wiser, but it also makes you less adventurous. It makes you more reluctant and more cautious, less innovative sometimes. But I had around me back then a group of very wise heads, including Michael Lansford. So that's, I suppose, the only area where I would have thought, had we not got the success in the criminal prosecution in 2012, that for me would possibly remain the only decision which was tinged with some sort of regret.
May I just put this to you though, about that particular private prosecution? If you hadn't done that, the law would never have changed about double jeopardy.
Oh, I agree, but that's,
so there you go.
But that's easy for you to say. You didn't sit through the trial and then see Doreen collapse at the end of it when the case was thrown out of court. You didn't see the weeks and months of absolute heartache that resulted from that process. And she never once said I was to blame or anybody was to blame. And that's the measure of the woman. But for me, there's a lot of soul searching. Did we do the right thing? Should we have done things differently? And those questions will always have remained. So that's why I say January 2012 and the convictions was a sense of redemption. I don't now need to say that decision was tinged with regret. So much good has come out of it. So, but that's hindsight for you. We could still be here talking about the fact that nobody was facing justice for Stephen's murder.
If you could rule the world for a day, what would you change or do?
Poverty and inequality. I mean, those two things are the roots of all evil.
How are you going to do that?
Oh, I'd make
You're
a
the king,
law. I'd distribute wealth equally. I would make sure. I would do it. You try and do it on democratic principle, but I suspect that I would end up being a dictator and make sure that everyone would follow what I had to say. That's not the best thing to do coming from a human rights lawyer. It would have to be done properly. But that's what I want to do. And, I don't think I'll ever see it in my lifetime. But that's what I want to campaign for, and that's what I want to continue doing.
Imran, thank you so much for the interview. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
I wouldn't say it's a pleasure for me, but it's been, thank you very much.
Thank you.